The colossal chamber thrummed with the low growl of ancient engines and the sharper bite of plasma. Aetherion, Emperor of the Iron Spire, leaned back on his throne of blackened star steel, the weight of 200 million gold enough to bend a lesser man's spine. His face was a mask of bored authority, sharp cheekbones, eyes like forged emeralds, but inside, fury coiled tighter than the wormhole he had just shattered. The air itself felt poisoned by the scent of scorched metal and the metallic tang of fear. 200 million. That was the number he had thrown at the problem like a starving beast at a corpse. Not a billion, not a trillion, 200 million, the exact sum he had drained from the treasury in a single frantic pulse. Gold bars, fleet reserves, alien credits, the works. Every last coin, every last drop of blood from his people, had been funneled into this quest. Because the human mechanic had betrayed him. Had left his flagship, the Thunder Fury, a crippled husk in the void, and Aetherion had been forced to watch his entire alliance shatter like cheap glass. He shifted on the throne, the starsteel groaning under his armored frame. The chamber was a cathedral of power. Vaulted ceilings painted with faded murals of his ancestors crushing lesser species, pillars carved with runes that glowed faintly with containment fields, and rows of silent soldiers standing like statues of death. But silence was a lie. His guards breathed heavily, boots scraping the obsidian floor. His counselors stood frozen, eyes downcast. And in the center of it all, the traitor waited. Jax Harlan. The name alone should have been enough to end the world. A human. A mechanic. A nobody. Yet this nobody had walked into Aetherion's life like a blade slipped between ribs. Last cycle, only last cycle, he had been on the Thunder Fury. A simple repair. Jax had walked the corridors, tools clinking at his belt, eyes hidden behind a pair of cracked goggles. He had been ordinary. Too ordinary. But his hands had spoken louder than any lie. Aetherion's voice finally broke the silence, cold and sharp as a plasma blade. Again, he commanded, the word echoing off the walls like a death knell. Search every inch of the outer veil. Every scrapyard, every back alley repair bay, every fool who dares touch my ships. I will not have a single weakness left unturned. The human mechanic who betrayed us, he dies screaming for what he did. A ripple of fear swept through the guards like wine through dry grass. One stepped forward, his armor clanking, voice shaking with the weight of 1,000 executions. My lord. The search teams returned empty-handed 3 hours ago. Every record points to the same name. The one the galaxy calls the human mechanic. Aetherion's emerald eyes narrowed to slits. The fury inside him surged hotter, a living thing now. He could feel it in his teeth, in his bones, in the way his pulse hammered against the chest plate of his armor. 200 million. 200 million gold, each coin minted from the sweat of conquered worlds, each one a drop of blood from loyal subjects. He had sacrificed entire districts to fund this. Families had starved while the search continued. Entire fleets had diverted resources that should have protected the borders. And for what? A human who called himself Jax? The man who had repaired his ship in one afternoon and walked away without even asking for a medal. Name him, Aetherion snarled, rising slowly from the throne. His shadow swallowed the counselor whole. The soldier swallowed hard. Jax. Jax Harlan. The man who repaired our flagship last cycle, the Thunder Fury. He was competent. Too competent. We dismissed him as disposable the moment he finished. He refused the pay you offered. Walked away muttering about, worth more than coin. We thought him nothing. The chamber seemed to hold its breath. Aetherion's laugh came out as a low, rumbling growl, the kind that made lesser species soil themselves in terror. Nothing? He cost us the alliance. 200 million in a single day to find the traitor who left my fleet hanging in the void. 200 million, and still nothing. Guards, bring him to me. Alive. I want the traitor on his knees before I end him. The iron doors at the far end of the chamber groaned open with a hydraulic hiss that sounded like a dying breath. Two massive soldiers in black and silver armor dragged a third figure through the gap. Jax Harlan stumbled into the light, pushed forward by the heavy grips on his arms. He was small, disgustingly small for a being of his species. Barely reached the guard's shoulder. Ordinary in the way only a human could be, no glowing implants, no exotic bloodlines, no aura of power. Ragged coveralls stained with grease and soot, a battered toolbox slung over one shoulder like it weighed nothing. His hands, calloused, scarred, stained black with engine oil, were loose at his sides, not clenched in fear. His face was ordinary too, freckled, weathered from years under open skies, a mop of messy brown hair that looked like it had never seen a comb, and eyes, those eyes. Warm brown, tired but steady, framed by wrinkles that spoke of late nights and early mornings. A small scar curved across one eyebrow, another across his jaw. He looked like he had just crawled out of a mechanic's garage after a 12-hour shift, not standing before the Emperor of the Iron Spire. Etherian stared down at him. The contrast was obscene. The Emperor's armor was a forest of spikes and runes, each one worth a lifetime of labor. Jax's coveralls were patched with duct tape that had clearly seen better days. The human's boots were scuffed and worn, soles cracked from walking too many repair bays. There was no deference in his posture. No trembling. No groveling. Just existence. Jax lifted his gaze. It met Etherian's without flinching. "You wanted me?" he asked, voice calm, almost conversational. The accent was thick, human, laced with the cadence of 1,000 casual conversations over coffee. "Figured I'd be the last one you called. Thought I was disposable after fixing that relay." Etherian's hands clenched until the knuckles cracked. The sound of it echoed. "You," he said, the single word dripping venom. "The one we seek. The one who sold us out. Speak, or I will have your soul flayed from your body and fed to my pet void worms." Jax tilted his head, a small, almost bemused smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. It was the smile of a man who had heard worse. "Yeah. I'm the guy who fixed your ship last week. The one you called the human who owes us. I was just doing my job, fixing the plasma relay before it cooked your entire bridge crew. But sure, keep the 200 million waiting. I've got a kid waiting at home for dinner." The words landed like a hammer on an anvil. The chamber exploded into chaos. Gasps from the counselors. A soldier's hand went to his sidearm. One guard actually dropped his rifle for half a second before catching it. But Etherian felt none of it. His breath caught, sharp, painful, like someone had driven a blade between his ribs and twisted. 200 million. The number burned behind his eyes. Every coin, every drop of sweat, every life sacrificed to buy this search. And here it was. Here he was. Not a monster in shadows. Not a traitor in the dark. Just a tired human mechanic who had fixed a leak in the Emperor's flagship and walked away without a second glance. "Kid?" Etherian repeated, the word tasting like ash. His voice rose, echoing off the rafters. "You dare speak of a kid while I stand before you? You stand here, the cause of my empire's fracture, and you speak of overtime? Of a date with your wrench?" Jax shrugged, the motion casual, like he was dismissing a spilled tool. He adjusted the toolbox on his shoulder, the metal clinking softly. "Yeah. Figured I'd earn a little extra. You humans, right? We fix what breaks. Don't really get the concept of leaving a job half done. That relay was leaking like a bad weld. I patched it, tested it, ran diagnostics. Your bridge crew was 2 seconds from oxygen starvation. I saved their lives. And you? You dragged me here like I owed you a war. The Emperor took one step down from the throne. The star steel groaned louder. His shadow swallowed Jack's whole, but the human didn't flinch. You owe me everything, Aetherian hissed, the words a storm. 200 million, Jax Harlan. That is the sum you cost me. Every gold bar, every credit, every loyal subject who starved so I could buy your life back. And you walk in here wearing grease like it's a medal? Jax's eyes narrowed slightly, but the weariness remained. He scratched at his jaw, where the scar pulled. 200 million? That's a lot. I've fixed better ships for less. But hey, if you're paying now, I'll take it. Cash, credits, whatever you got. I've got a kid's birthday party tomorrow. Cake, balloons, the works. Figured I'd swing by the scrapyard after, grab a shift at the garage. Regular job. Not Emperor stuff. A counselor whispered something, Aetherian didn't hear it. The rage was a living fire now, consuming every rational thought. He had ordered this search at the cost of entire border worlds. He had executed ministers who failed. He had ordered the dissolution of alliances that had lasted centuries. And all for what? A human who thought a birthday party mattered more than his empire? Enough, Aetherian growled, the word vibrating through the chamber like a bass note from a supernova. He slammed one gauntlet fist against the arm of the throne. The impact cracked the star steel. You will kneel. You will beg. And then you will die. Slowly. For what you did to the Thunder Fury. For what you cost me. Jax finally moved. Not in fear. In resignation. He set the toolbox down with a soft clank, like it was just another repair job. Kneel? I don't kneel for anyone. Not emperors, not gods, not even my own boss back at the garage. I fix things. I don't break them. Or wait. Or pretend I'm something I'm not. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the engines outside seemed to quiet. Aetherian felt the weight of the chamber press down on him, 200 million gold, the betrayal, the humiliation. He was the Emperor. He had crushed species. He had stared down black holes and won. And this? This was a man in coveralls. Jax reached into his pocket. He pulled out a small, greasy cloth, nothing special. He wiped his hands on it, the motion so ordinary it hurt to watch. Look, Emperor. I'm not the guy you think. I didn't sell anything. I didn't leave you hanging. I fixed what was broken. That's all I do. But if you're gonna keep me here, I've got time. I can tell you about the kid. He's 6. Loves spaceships. Wants to be a mechanic when he grows up. Funny, right? The guy who saved your ship ends up fixing a kid's dream. Aetherian's breath came in short bursts. The fury was still there, roaring, but something else was rising beneath it, something cold and calculating. This human was underestimating him. That was good. That was how you broke a mind. But the numbers, 200 million. He had spent it all. And now the man stood there, speaking of birthdays and overtime, like the Empire was a minor inconvenience. You speak of your child as if it excuses you, Aetherian said, voice low and dangerous. As if a toy and a meal can balance the scales of betrayal. Jax laughed then. A short, rough sound. Excuse? No. But I don't break things that don't need fixing. You're broken right now, Emperor. All that power, all that gold, and you're wasting it on me. I'm just the guy who showed up on time. The chamber doors hissed again. More guards flooded in, but Aetherian raised a hand. They stopped. He needed to hear this. Needed to understand how one small human could make an emperor question everything. Jax took a step closer. Not toward the throne. Not toward any threat. He just stood there. Look, if this is some big mistake, fine. But I've got a shift tomorrow. Kid's got a project due. And my wife, ex-wife, whatever, she's waiting for the check I promised. Regular life. Not this. Aetherian stared. The emerald eyes burned. The fury had not faded, but it had changed. It had become something sharper. Something like wonder. How had this been missed? How had the galaxy, the Empire, the entire search network overlooked the man who fixed their problems without ever asking for a throne? 200 million, Aetherian repeated, almost to himself. And you walked away. Yeah, Jax said. I did. Got offered a better job anyway. More money. Less, whatever this is. He gestured vaguely at the chamber, at the Emperor, at the soldiers. But hey. If you're serious about paying me now, I'll stay. I can even fix whatever's broken in your palace. You look like you could use a good plumber. The words hung in the air. Aetherian felt the last of his control slip. Not rage now. Exhaustion. The kind that comes after 1,000 years of war. 200 million. Gone. For this. For a human who mopped up oil and called his kid's birthday important. He descended the last step from the throne. The star steel rang under his boot. He stopped inches from Jax. Close enough to see the freckles. Close enough to smell the grease and the faint trace of coffee. You will leave my sight, Aetherian said, voice cracking with something that was not quite rage. Now. Before I forget that I am the Emperor. Jax nodded once. Sure thing. Doors that way. He picked up his toolbox. The click of his boots on the floor was the only sound. But Aetherian didn't stop him. Not yet. He watched the human walk toward the doors, ordinary, unremarkable, carrying the weight of an empire's folly on his shoulders like it was nothing. And in that moment, as the doors closed behind Jax Harlan, Aetherian realized the truth that had been buried under 200 million gold. The human had never been the enemy. He had been the only one who had ever looked at the Emperor and seen a man, not a god. And now the Emperor, for the first time, had nothing left to command. He sank back onto the throne, the weight of the star steel crushing him. The chamber was silent again. But inside Aetherian's chest, something new was born. Something that felt dangerously close to fear. Not of war. Of the ordinary man who had just walked out of his life, leaving behind 200 million, a shattered alliance, and the dawning realization that power meant nothing when the one person you chased had only ever wanted to go home.